Nick, I can't tell you how much I've been looking forward to actually doing this with you. I consider you my friend. You're one of the people that I've looked up to more in this industry than absolutely anybody. And we're finally getting to sit down and have a chat on camera and to share it with our students and our educators throughout the country. And I want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule right here in Manhattan. We came to you this time.
I love it.
I love it too. but just so everybody knows, this is a Monday. It's being shot on a Monday.
Yep.
And Nick worked heavily over the weekend, did classes over the weekend, worked in your salon over the weekend, and now you're back in the salon on Monday. So you haven't had a break. I mean, literally haven't had a break. He took an hour off to come across town and do this with us over here in Manhattan. And I want to tell you how much I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's so great to be here, and it's great hanging out with you, as always.
It really, it's a mutual thing. Believe me, it is. Nick, a lot of people know you from stage, and they know you from What Not to Wear. They know you from educational classes, now the Masters of Beauty programs, which you're doing all over the country. And they know you as obviously a great salon owner and the best salon and the biggest salon probably in not only New York, but probably all the East Coast possibly. But they know you from all of those things. But we want to get into the Nick Arrojo and the guy that got here, what brought him to this point, and then ultimately what message you've got for the people who want to follow you and who want to not only follow you, but even do better than you did, okay? And you've always been very open about that. So let's get into it. I love your story. And I would love for you to tell our students and our educators exactly how you got into this industry.
Well, it's a great question. And, you know, it's amazing when I think back. I've been doing this now for 29 years.
You started when you were 2?
I started when I was 16.
Right.
You know, when I was a young man growing up in England, came from a very poor family. And, yeah, I was a pretty smart kid. I was actually pretty smart at school. I was one of the cleverest in the class, you know, which was very interesting. But I was always very focused on fashion and music. And, you know, coming from a working class background, to be creatively inspired, that was kind of the release, you know. So I started collecting music when I was 11 years of age. And I was really following all the fashion and the fashion magazines. And I had an older brother, a couple of years older than me, who I always looked up to because he, you know, I idolized him, you know, in that kind of younger, older brother way. And he actually got into the hair business, so that really kind of caught my attention to the hair business. I went to an all-boys Catholic school, and
I went to an all-boys private school too, believe me.
You know, it was great. You know, when I was 11 years of age, you know, just playing soccer, football as I call it, you know, that was the thing.
Yeah, you English don't really know what football really is,
I
do you?
guess not. I guess not. We just kick it with the ball. We kick it with our foot. We call it football.
Football, what a concept.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We don't kick it with the ball or kick it with the foot that often, and we do call it football. What a concept.
I know.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I was really, you know, so I went to school, I remember 11 years of age, all-boys Catholic school, you know. And then you hit 14, 15, and all of a sudden you're like, you know, looking at girls, okay? And, you know, all of a sudden your life changes a little bit. You realize, you know, that, you know, the opposite sex exists. And as a young man, a young boy, I was always like the creative kid in the class, you know. Was like had the music, the fashion magazines, and my look was very different from everybody else's. So I was always, and in those days, you went from being a mod to a rocker to a new romantic. The fashion changed very quickly. So I was kind of that fashionable, eclectic, creative young kid that was smart. But I really wasn't, you know, I didn't have parents that really focused me in on the academics. Right. Okay? So I was pretty free, and I was very strong-minded and very, you know, free-willed. And when I came to leave school at 16, you leave school at 16 in England, I needed a job. Now in the 80s, in the early 80s, we were in another recession. You know, I think in the late 70s, England was in a deep recession. Sure. And there was very few jobs to be had. Right. And in the early 80s, there was very few jobs to be had. And, you know, my teachers always said, you're going to be a doctor. It was either be a doctor, be a banker, you know, be a teacher, be a solicitor, be a, you know, it was all of these, you know, careers. That was the only career that you could have. Of course, me, you know, being really into music and fashion, and then of course girls, and going out to nightclubs when I was 16, and you know, trying to get into places and watching, you know, bands and going to music concerts.
It's like being released from prison, getting out of an all-boys Catholic school, isn't it?
A little bit. You know, I was kind of free. And you know, with my brother also, who kind of was in the same kind of thing, and he was a hairdresser. So basically, there was no jobs to be had. There was absolutely no jobs to be had. What I really wanted to be was a photographer. And my first job that my first interview was a photographer, to be a photographer's assistant. And I remember, you know, looking at him, and it wasn't fashion photography, it was like industrial architect photography. So it wasn't
taking pictures of widgets and
yeah,
things like
it wasn't that exciting.
Right.
And I remember the guy having a double-breasted suit and his tie hanging behind him when I spoke in this old wooden room with this old wooden desk, and I thought, this is really unappealing and unattractive.
Right.
So then what happened was there was always this one salon in my town that had the brown tinted windows, okay? And it just had that cool look to it. And it was called Neil Denmark. And I always looked at that salon. And one day I decided to walk through the door and see if they needed assistance. And of course, being a guy, because it seems like, you know, there's always a lot more girls in salons than there is guys. Being a guy, and I walked in, I said, I'm really looking for a job as an assistant. They hired me on the spot. And there the career began. And realistically, I remember day one, this is what I do remember, day one being excited, thinking, today's the day, I'm going to go meet loads of girls, and I'm going to listen to music all day. And I had a plastic bag filled with tapes, because, you know, it was
cassette
before
tapes?
yeah, cassette tapes. And I was like dying to get there so I could put one of my tapes in. So, you know, thinking that they'd let me, which I'm sure they wouldn't, you know, it was the new kid. So I started that day, and I remember they had a radio, so they listened to the radio all day, so there was no cassettes.
Right.
But I started working there, and I was having a lot of fun. I can tell you the first, it was September. First month was just so much fun. I was just hanging out. There was a lot of girls in the salon that worked there. People a little bit older than me, 18, 19, 17. I was a 16-year-old kid. I was like the little kid in the place. And it was like a rude awakening, getting to grow up immediately with, you know, these older women or these older girls. And they were teaching me a lot of stuff, as you can well imagine. You know, my eyes were getting wider and more open. And I was having a lot of fun in that salon. I was kind of like a little bit more mischievous, and I was fun, and that personality was coming out. But then all of a sudden, you know, I just started doing the basic stuff, which was, you know, washing the dishes and organizing the perm rods. And I remember doing a job rota, and one of the girls said to me in the back room, she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just organizing what jobs we can all do at the end of the day." So that we can, you know, be more proficient. And everyone thought I was a little strange, but to me it was a lot of common sense stuff. And I realized there and then, I said to myself, it was a very conscious decision. I said to myself, if this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. That was it. People tell me now, you're so thankful, you're so lucky, not thankful, you're so lucky to have found something that you love, you know. And it wasn't like I was dreaming about becoming a hairdresser. I wasn't. What I was, when I left school, I needed a job. Hairdressing was the easiest job to get. It fulfilled some of those key objectives for me. And as soon as I started doing it, I said, if this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my career, I'm going to take it to the top. And that has been the journey ever since then. And I've really been working for that.
Was that first salon, were they good mentors as far as teaching you anything or not?
No, you learn from the people that teach you well, and you learn from the people that don't teach you well. And as you get older and you go through life, you know, you start to understand that some practices that are being kind of, I suppose, ingrained in you, maybe are not the right things. And I'll touch on that a little bit, you know, because when I was at Neil Denmark, And it was the nicest looking salon. And we had our first big staff meeting. And at this stage of the game, I was being seen by the staff as someone who was very eager, very enthusiastic, very passionate, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to do a good job. And I found that a lot of what we used to talk about in the office, or in the staff room, or in the back room, was training, training, training. Now, in those days, I used to get one class a month. I had 3 male bosses. So the boss would teach, one boss would teach 1 month, one boss would teach in the next month. So there was no consistency or continuity. And one class a month is nothing.
For an apprentice. I mean, this is somebody
It was an apprenticeship. You don't go to school. You don't
Right.
have to go to school in England. You
Understood.
just go and get an apprenticeship. So all the girls were frustrated, and we had a big staff meeting at Christmas. It was about the end of November, and all the bosses did was the typical, you know, it's going to be the busy season. We want you to work hard. We want you to make sure that the magazines are stacked, that the clients get their coats. It was the usual stuff. And I remember that staff meeting. I put my hand up at the end of the staff meeting and I said, I'm happy to do everything that you've suggested, and I think it's great. However, we need to have more education so that we can get better quicker. And that was when one of the bosses said to me, Nick, you don't even know how to hold a pair of scissors. And he made me feel incredibly small. And
I was going to say, whose fault is that? Is it
It's
the
his fault.
mentor or is it the student?
Of course. And this is, you know, again, these are things that you have to look at.
Right.
In my own business today, if somebody doesn't pass, I have to say, I always say, let's look and see whether it's the student that didn't pass or whether it was the educators or the education that didn't succeed. So, you know, that's how you can look at everything from a couple of different sides.
So you now know that this is not the place for you to grow at that point.
Well, you know, and I learned 2 things. One, that it wasn't the place for me to learn.
All right.
And 2, that when I was standing up for everybody,
Right.
that they wouldn't stand up for me.
Right.
You know, I felt very exposed. And I was a 16-year-old kid, you know. So then what happened was I had to leave that salon and go and find another job. And I did. And the same thing happened in the second job. And then I went for the third job. And it was the third job, and it's really cosmic how the world turns, you know. As you get older, you look back and you say, all these things happen for a reason.
Absolutely.
I'd gone to this very special little salon, and this woman who'd worked with Vidal Sassoon, and she was one of the best world champion hair setters in the world, okay? And she'd worked with Sassoon, all right?
Yeah.
And I went for an interview with her, and she said to me, she said, did you apply at Vidal Sassoon? And of course, I said, of course I have, but I hadn't. I hadn't,
Right.
but I lied to her,
Right.
okay? I went for an interview with her and I walked away, and it was a very strict salon, and you know, and then I found myself going back into that salon, and she said, have you applied at Vidal Sassoon? And I said, yes, I have. So the second time I went in, I lied again. And I felt so guilty that I went home that day and put an application in to Sassoon. And I got the call to go in for an interview with Sassoon. And I was really wanting to work for her because I thought she had the magic and she could teach me.
Right.
And they did do good education. But she really said to me,
She saw something and you didn't.
you should go to Vidal Sassoon and get trained. And you know, because I lied to her, I felt so bad that I had to go and follow through, and you know, I suppose the Catholic guilt really,
that's gonna say,
really
of
held
course.
me to that.
Of course.
So I went and I managed to get an interview at Sassoon's.
And
And I got an interview at Sassoon's, and I remember the interview, and it's the same kind of practice that I have in my own salon. We did a group interview. There was about 30 kids there, and they had a group interview with top brass. There was like Nigel Sillis, Tim Hartley,
Oh, God.
Sue Pegram, and
big names.
Peter Bradley. So like
Peter
really,
Bradley.
really big, you know, people for the Sassoon organization. And they said to me, you get 5 minutes after the group interview, and that's it. And in my 5-minute interview, I asked them a couple of questions. And they said to me, why do you want to work at Vidal Sassoon? I said, I didn't know that I wanted to work for Sassoon until I came and listened to what you had to offer. Because now I know that you really offer me an education, now I want to work for you. And I think they were quite, you know, shocked at my cheekiness.
Yeah.
You know, and then they said, they kind of looked at each other and they went, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
If we got here then.
He's one of us.
Yeah. And then they said, do you have any questions? I said, yeah. I said, how do you, can you become part of the management structure as a creative director or a manager? And they looked at me like,
this kid doesn't even know how to, yeah.
Who is this guy?
Yeah.
So I said my bit and I walked out. And then I waited for the mail for 2 weeks, waiting to get that letter.
Right.
And it never came. And I thought, well, maybe I didn't get the job. Okay. And then I wrote to my friend who lived in London, and I was going to move to London. I was just turned 17.
Because you're still in Manchester. So.
Still in Manchester, England. I said, I'm going to move to London. I'm going to stay with you, and I'm going to find a job in a salon, and I'm going to train in London, because I figured that would be the place for me. And I wrote that letter, and I had it. And the following morning, when I was about, get up to go and post it, my mum knocked on my bedroom door, and she said, there's a letter for you. And she passed me the envelope, and it was a beige envelope with an embossed, shiny Vidal Sassoon, and I went, whoa.
Okay.
And then I opened it, and they said, we've offered you the job. And I was like, yes.
That was your beginning.
And that really was my beginning, and my real name's David. Okay, so I was like David, and I walked into the Sassoon salon on that morning, and there was another guy that started with me.
Had you been known as David at this point in your life?
David's my real name.
No, I know that. But I mean, what did people call you? Your schoolmates and everything else? David.
Dave.
Right.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
David, Dave.
Right.
So I walked in that day, and they said to me, we've already got a David, you got to change your name. And Sassoons in those days, and probably a little bit today, but more so I think in those days, were very strict. It was a very, very strict environment, very structured. And they said, change your name. So I was like, Wayne was my name. I was a Wayne.
Yeah.
For about an hour.
Yeah, didn't like that one.
Well, no, I was walking through the salon, and I kept on hearing stylists go, Wayne, hey, Wayne. And I was like, whoever this Wayne guy is deaf. Okay? And then I realized it was me, and I said, that's not going to work. So then they got really upset with me, and I said, well, I'll be Nick. And they went, Nick it is. And that was that. And then I became Nick Arrojo, and that was me starting what has become, a massive part of, my future and my career, because everyone knows me as Nick Arrojo, and that's my name.
It's your stage name.
Yeah, it's my stage name, so it's good. I'm incognito, baby.
Yeah. But do you have anybody that still calls you David?
My mom.
Really?
My mom and my
But your wife doesn't?
No, my mom, my sister, and my nephew and nieces.
That's funny.
Yeah. And even my brother, who works for me now, calls me Nick, because he knows, like he works next to me at work, and he's got a desk next to mine.
Right.
Yeah.
That's totally cool. That is an amazing story. Yeah. It really is.
And I started at Sassoons, and I was scared to lose. I said, I've got this opportunity. It was like this golden opportunity. And I really felt like this was my place, that I could really establish myself as a successful stylist. I'd never been on a plane. I'd never really traveled that much. I wasn't exposed to too much apart from fashion, which was what my lifeblood was. And all of a sudden I found myself surrounded by a lot of really cool people, with really cool people coming in, and pop stars coming in to get their hair cut, the bands like the Smiths and Echo and the Bunnymen and all of these, and I was like shampooing their hair, and it was like, wow, I'm really in this really cool, eclectic spot. And there were people coming in from other cities and from other Sassoon salons, from New York, from Germany, from all over London. And my eyes were like wide open.
Your vision.
Yeah, wide open.
So how long were you there before you came to the U.S.?
Well, I was at Sassoons for almost 10 years. Yeah, I mean, I really, excelled in that company, because I think I possessed one of the key things that will help you be successful, and that is I had the passion. Right. The passion to want to be successful.
That's what it's all about.
And by having that passion, you see what happens is, if you link passion with hard work.
What a concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major concept here. If you have passion for something and you're prepared to work hard and you're nice, then you become likable, because you're there to help.
Right.
I mean, those good old days when you started, my number one asset was sweeping the floor and handing my stylist a water spray bottle. But I was the best hander of a water spray bottle.
Right.
My hairdressers didn't even, I knew what they were thinking before they were even thinking it. So they never had to go far. And I became known because I was smart, because if my artistic director, I was assisting him, his name's Mark Hayes, he's now the creative director for Sassoon's, you know, globally. If he went to put his hand out to pick up a styling lotion, it was right there.
Right.
If he went to pick up for a back mirror, it was right there, and it was clean.
And he knew.
And he knew.
That he could trust you for that. You knew what he was thinking. What a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But it taught you your own timing, didn't it?
Well, you know, it really taught me a lot about, it taught me a lot about discipline.
Right.
I was very disciplined. And I just said, you know what, I'm not necessarily that talented as a hairdresser because I've not been trained. It's a completely trainable skill.
Right.
It's not like there's only some people that can be hairdressers and some people can't. I know this because I've trained people that I thought maybe they'll never make it as a hairdresser, but I've made them become successful hairstylists because if someone turns up to really practice well with models, as I did, you know, then I've got a chance of becoming somebody that can understand the art of cutting hair.
We could talk about Vidal Sassoon and being in London for forever. I mean, that's a whole, that could be several tapes. But I want to get into your coming to America. You came to America to get a job with, was that when you came for Bumble and Bumble?
Yeah, I mean, even when I was 17 years of age, I always wanted to come to this city. Okay, that was a dream of mine. You know, even when I was an infant, I wanted to come to America. Okay, for some reason, I don't know where I got it. I was a big fan of Walt Disney, and you know, it was like my imagination run wild. You know, the one thing I do have is a great imagination.
You sure do.
And I always wanted to come to New York City, and then eventually that chance came to me by getting a job offer by the owner of Bumble and Bumble. Okay, so I'd managed to work myself into a situation where my reputation was known, and now all of a sudden I was actually getting, I don't know about sourced out, in other words, I don't think they were actually, you know, but they'd heard of me. So I knew that they'd heard that I wanted to come to New York, and the owner of Bumble offered me a job to come to America and to New York City, which was like my dream. And Bumble was my dream salon. Okay, and I'd thought about that for a long time. So I got all of my dreams. In fact, when I said goodbye to my mother, she gave me a card. And in that card, and I was on a one-way ticket to the US, and I was 28 years old. And she gave me a card, and it was one of those things that you couldn't really say goodbye because you got emotional. So I just went, see you, Mum. And she gave me the card, and it was kind of like heavy. Yeah. You know, and I knew it wasn't money because we don't have any. So I opened it up, and in the card it said, you know, David.
Of course.
You know, she said, your dream has come true. And it was a little globe. There was like a little diamante globe. It was like very inexpensive. Cool. And there it was, and said, you know, you're fulfilling your dream. And it made me stop for a second and go, yeah, she's right. So I came to America.
By the way, with how much money in your pocket?
I came to America with $1,500 and 2 suitcases, and I knew one person in this country, and he lived out in New Jersey, and he's a very successful hairdresser. His name's Patrick McIver. And he was a friend that I'd met along the way. You know, as I navigate through our lives, you know, you come across those people that become friends that you become close to. And he was the only guy that I knew. And before I knew it, I was getting out at 42nd Street and walking to 56th Street to go and work at Bumble and Bumble. And it was, you know, it was kind of like the dream come true, but it was also like a wild experience to experience being in New York City. And the newspapers, didn't mean anything to me. I didn't know anything that was in the newspapers, but everyone could speak the same language, but I was